Act 3, Scene 1. Claudius and his entourage have gathered to get an update on Hamlet's lunacy. Claudius feels frustrated because Rosencrantz and Guildenstern don't have any useful information. You'll notice that they not only try to hide how much they failed, but they even lie when asked how Hamlet treated them. Rosencrantz's response includes this word, which is not actually a racial slur, but an uncommon word which means stingy or cheap. In other words, Rosencrantz is telling the king that Hamlet had few to no questions for them, and freely answered all of theirs. You'll remember, this is a lie. Fortunately for them, the queen gives them an out, an opportunity to talk about the theater players who are arriving to Hamlet's joy. With that bit of good news, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are permitted to leave, and then the king dismisses Gertrude so he can finalize his plan with Polonius. You have to wonder how much information he shares with her. The play never tells us if she was in on her husband's killing, but it's certain that she would not approve of Claudius plotting to do something bad to her son. Before she leaves, Gertrude gives Ophelia a bit of encouragement, telling her she hopes that Ophelia's beauty can help cure Hamlet of his current foul temper. We don't know what, if any, relationship Gertrude had with Ophelia in the past, and this exchange doesn't give us more insight. But those of you who have had to deal with hostile parents of your significant other know that this is pretty fine as far as these kinds of interactions go. If anything, it probably leaves Ophelia feeling more conflicted about whom she wants to side with. Polonius activates his default plan, spy on others. He gives Ophelia something like stage directions, provides her a prayer book, and tells her that religious books make you look good, that with devotion's visage and pious action we do sugar o'er the devil himself. In one of his few admissions, 2 to be precise, of feeling guilt, Claudius recognizes that his actions are impossible to justify, and that what he did is far worse than what sex workers do. Which is a fair point. He murdered his brother, while they're just working-class people trying to make a living. Now, as Hamlet enters, some of his subsequent behavior makes more sense if we picture him entering the scene a little bit earlier than this point and overhearing the instructions that Polonius gave. In other words, discovering reason to find Ophelia more suspicious than he already does. Last time we saw Hamlet, he was jubilant with his plan and his cleverness, and now he's bounced back to the other end of the spectrum. To be or not to be. You might have heard these slightly famous opening lines, but what I really want you to think about is the first 10 or so lines here that involve him exploring what it means to not be, right? If to be means to live, not be gives us all the reasons that might make it more attractive for us to kill ourselves. When you get to line 73, there's the rub. Hamlet shifts his thinking so that he points out what stops us. A lot of Hamlet's self-questioning and self-doubt emerge from his underlying fear that ultimately he might be a coward. If you think of this play as one where Hamlet stops to ask himself at various points, am I a coward? Then a lot of his moodiness and manic swings to depression start to make sense because he's a man-child, our Shakespearean-era Holden Caulfield. And his father, if you recall, was a warrior known best for slaying Norwegian kings and going around dressed up in battle armor. Hamlet, on the other hand, is a scholar, a college student. This is very kite runner kind of territory where the son is this sensitive poet type and the father's like, no, I asked for a manly son. Moving on down through the rest of these reasons why people don't commit suicide, including another famous line / title to one of the best Star Trek films, Hamlet comes to the somewhat comforting for him conclusion that maybe it's not just that I'm the coward, but that all of us are cowards because we all fear death. He spots Ophelia, or at least acknowledges that he sees Ophelia now, depending on how much foreknowledge you think he has, and his phrasing here, nymph, in thy orisons be remembered, betrays a tenderness that he completely lacks for the rest of this scene. Literally translated, he says, remember me in your prayers. It's almost as if he bears regret for all that he and Ophelia could have been as a couple. This tenderness quickly turns to scorn, however, when she tells him she's back to return the gifts he has given her. Our prince turns petty and claims that he never gave her anything. Ophelia, torn between the two most important men in her life, her father and her now ex-boyfriend, responds with outrage and hurt, understandably. The perfume lost of his gifts is a metaphor for the no longer sweet memories between them. So with a little bit of that hurtful language from her, Hamlet drastically escalates by asking her literally if she's chaste, but it's a rude question. It's equivalent to asking, "You whore, are you sleeping around?" She's taken aback and he presses, "If you're a virgin, are you fair, as in pretty? Because if you are a virgin and pretty, then your virginity should allow no talk regarding your beauty." He's making a play on words because he's Hamlet, and that beauty will sooner transform chastity into what it is for a pimp than chastity can translate beauty back into chastity. These are all fancy ways of calling his girlfriend out and implying very rude and hurtful things about her. Ophelia offers a touch of reproach here by pointing out, "You made me believe that you loved me." To which he replies, "You shouldn't have believed me because our old selves can't be inoculated by virtue. We are who we are." Another famous line right here, a nunnery or a convent is a place full of nuns, right? A group of religious ladies who have sworn a vow of chastity and don't generally live with guys. Kind of in contrast to that other group of ladies we discussed previously who live in that other type of house, the brothel. It's quite possible that Hamlet refers to both here. He points out how flawed he is and offers her advice, possibly not out of spite, but he implores her not to believe men in general, but to spend the rest of her life in a nunnery. This last question, which seems to come out of nowhere, marks a crucial test for both of them. Hamlet, for whatever reason, asks where her father is. Most plays portray this by indicating that he has spotted or has some suspicions that Polonius is somewhere nearby eavesdropping. If Hamlet knows this to be the case, then this is a test for Ophelia to see which man she chooses to side with. And if that's the case, she fails that test badly from Hamlet's point of view, which explains why his rudeness escalates even further from this point on. Hamlet essentially curses her. If you do marry, you can be frigid, you can be pure, and you will still not escape torment. Or if you have to marry an idiot, because wise men will know exactly what kind of tramp they've gotten themselves into. It's kind of reminiscent of Daisy in The Great Gatsby, wishing that her daughter grows up to be a beautiful fool, so as to not know the more painful truths in life. Hamlet's rage towards Ophelia, his mother, and womankind in general just erupts into full-blown sexism here with the reference to the paintings. You guys know that word is makeup. Women with their makeup tutorials and fake faces act like you're one thing, but in reality you're all something else. Something that rhymes with bore. Oh, and by the way, I say we should stop marriage. But if you're already married, for all those people, let them keep on living, except for one person, someone whose name rhymes with Blodius. Ophelia's speech decries Hamlet's fall from a noble and sovereign mind into something that's ruined and mad, kind of bringing to mind his speeches about the world being a rotting prison filled with despair. The king comes across completely unimpressed by his counselor's pet theory. That did not look like a man who's crazy in love. I need to send him to England because he's dangerous. Polonius asks for one last chance to prove himself to the boss. He advises that Claudius hold off until after the play so that Gertrude can talk alone with Hamlet. Polonius presumably is gambling that at some point Hamlet will reveal enough to prove Polonius right and thus restore him in the eyes of Claudius, who is quickly growing more suspicious, even fearful of his nephew.